The state of North Dakota is now in the second day of their trial against the federal government for the damages caused by the Dakota Access Pipeline protests.
North Dakota is seeking $38 million from the U.S. government, while the U.S. says the payment is not warranted. KX News' Mary Gutenkopf has more on what happened in the federal courthouse today as we lead local.
The court heard testimony from Trooper Dennis Gallagher, the chief pilot for the North Dakota Highway Patrol. Gallagher explained aerial footage that he captured from the Highway Patrol plane. The footage depicted activity in the protest camp from the beginning of the camp in August of 2016 to the camp's cleanup in March of 2017. While questioning Gallagher, the state brought attention to activity that happened on October 27th, a day that law enforcement refers to as the Big Push, as they were pushed by landowners to remove protesters from private property. Gallagher says during the Big Push, protesters on horses rounded up buffalo on Cannonball Ranch and got them to stampede towards law enforcement and other protesters. Gallagher says the buffalo were 100 yards away from protesters, and as he feared for law enforcement and protester safety, he diverted the buffalo by flying 15 to 20 feet from the ground, a low altitude he had never flown before. The court also heard testimony from Sean Johnson, the planning chief for the Department of Emergency Services during the protests. Johnson explained how he headed up a unified command structure in order to have an organized approach to the DAPL protests. As part of this unified command, they counted numbers of vehicles at the protests to estimate numbers and trends. Johnson noted that U.S. Attorney Chris Myers, U.S. Marshal Paul Ward, and BCI Director Dallas Carlson all wanted to help, but they said their organizations refused to let them help. Morton County Sheriff Kyle Kirkmeyer also testified about his experience with the DAPL protests. At the time of the protests, he said there were 32 people working for the county, covering nearly 2,000 square miles. Sheriff Kirkmeyer described how the Department of Justice and the Interior wrote a letter claiming they would deploy resources to North Dakota. He said he did not receive the help he requested, and the protests just increased. In cross-examination, the U.S. questioned the witnesses about whether or not the protests occurred on Corps land or on private land, to which they said that it occurred on both. Reporting for KX News, I'm Mary Gutenkopf.
The case is expected to continue next week, where many other law enforcement, elected officials, and emergency service personnel are expected to testify against the United States.